So thanks everyone for coming out on your Saturday night to talk about art, the internet, and the future. 3 of my favorite topics to discuss. I'm Willa. I do a lot of different types of things on the internet, and I used to work for SXSW, which was really fun with Kier. And I'm really excited to be here in the Pop Up Showroom at Gray Area with Electric Objects. They are making this screen prototype that will eventually be in the homes of many people as a way to bring all of the beauty that is the internet into your home. And they're dealing with some of the issues that I'm really excited about talking about, which are how does art that's made with computers or for computers, how does that get engaged with? How do you look at that in a way that's different or the same to actual art objects? And how do those types of digital objects come to become a part of the traditional art market? Or do they need to have their own system because of how they are so fundamentally different from an object that is physically embodied? So like a painting. Does that make sense? Digital versus analog art. So I thought we'd get started. Oh, just for housekeeping, if you need to go to the bathroom, it's in the back to the left. And just so you all know where we are at Gray Area's new Art and Tech Theater in the Mission. Give it up for Josette and Kirsty. She just told me this theater was built in 1940. They're restoring it. They just restored this beautiful floor, which we've sadly completely covered. But they're doing a great job, and soon this place will hopefully be bustling with an incubator that houses amazing work at the cutting edge of art technology. So that's really exciting, and I couldn't think of a better place to have this talk. So I asked all of the panelists, for lack of a better term, to come up with just a brief way to describe their relationship to this topic, and I'm just going to let them introduce themselves, because I always think that's better than me pretending to know exactly how they would want to describe themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Zoe Solich. I am the Director of Artist Relations at Electric Objects, so I am pretty closely tied to what is happening here. Before I started working at Electric Objects, I worked in nonprofits. I was at Rhizome, which is a nonprofit affiliated with the New Museum in New York City, and then briefly at IBM and Art Technology Center in New York City. And then, yeah, so I guess I've always been I'm an internet kid. I grew up online, so I've always considered myself someone who's been fairly knowledgeable of internet culture and internet art. My whole career has been based on internet art, and so it's been pretty exciting to work with everyone here at Electric Objects to bring internet art into people's homes. So yeah, that's it.
Hi everyone, my name is Min Liu, and I'm the founder and developer for Bluebird Art. Bluebird Art is the mobile marketplace and community that connects artists, independent artists, directly with consumers to help them understand, appreciate, and purchase original pieces for the home. The goal is really to build a personal relationship between the artist and the buyer through the creative process of making. For the past 2 years, I've done extensive studies with buyers, consumer behavior, why they purchase, why they don't purchase, and really the deep reasons why consumers come to appreciate art. So my background is in technology. I have a computer science degree. I love art. Went to art school in Italy, just the best summer of my life. And also have some design experience from Stanford Design School and IDEO. Have a business degree, and then decided that I wanted to pursue my personal passion, which is bring art and technology together. So what I'm doing really with Bluebird is bring physical art, analog art, to people through digital means.
Cool. Hi everyone. My accent is Australian. I've been here for about 3 years, just to help you out. I joined SXSW about a year ago. Before that, I was head of digital at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Sydney, and before that, I worked for Australia's equivalent of PBS. And before that, I worked for artists building interactive artworks and media artworks. And before that, I was a physicist. Before that, I worked in the .com boom in Australia. We call it Silicon Beach. response to Silicon Valley. And before that, I studied physics. So for a long time, I've been really interested in the way that technology intersects with humans, and the most interesting way of doing that I could find was making artworks. It turns out I'm not very good at making artworks, but I'm good at helping other people make artworks, and so that's become my life's work for the last 15 years or so. And so I'm a little bit of an insider in the professional art world. I'm also working with SXSW on arts conservation research project that's looking at the current state and the potential future of conserving digital artworks. I'm interested in this topic from lots of different angles, and I'm curious to see what comes out tonight.
Hey guys, I'm Courtney. I am an artist and designer. I'm a visual designer for Yahoo. I'm on a team with the task force of designing the future of the internet. One of the internets. I also run a collaborative project called Cool, and we focus on bringing internet friends, creative internet friends together, and produce projects that are often object-based. And my personal creative process is one that often is kind of in this infinite loop of being on the internet and then in real life and then back on the internet, and then I bring it back in real life and then I put it back on the internet. So it's forever, for eternity.
Hey everyone, my name is Valentine. I am a writer, freelance writer, and I work for the Civic Beat. I have written a lot about arts and technology and spoken about it for South by Southwest, ACLU, YBCA, and I write a lot for Hyperallergic and Vice and a bunch of other publications. And I've been really interested with net art. I grew up in kind of a small town in Indiana, so I was always interested in contemporary art, but net art was a way for me to, I could see the art that people were talking about. That was really exciting. So I also curated the world's first Tumblr symposium, which is probably why I'm here. But yeah, so thanks for that. Awesome.
Thanks, guys. So the first question that I want to dig right into is just the way that, obviously digital art or computer-based art is fundamentally different from artworks that exist in, I don't even know how to describe it, like they're matter, rather than a digital file that needs to be read by hardware and software in order to be viewed. So, but what I'm wondering about is, does this mean that these digital works, are so different from object-based artworks that they shouldn't really participate in the existing art market or art world in the same ways? Do they need their own system? Does anyone want to kick us off?
Sure. So you're asking, are they different?
Well, we know they're different, but are they so different that they need completely new systems in order to be viewed, understood, collected?
I don't think that they're so different that they can't be collected. It's just a matter of physicality. Like, can they actually physically be collected? And that's where kind of, for me personally, when I'm creating a piece of work, I'm stuck in this, like, okay, well, how do I present it in this art show that I've been invited to? Okay, I have to press print. That's my option. So, but the thing is that they're not so different, because there's the same mental process behind a digital piece, and it would be something that you've painted or some other traditional medium.
I think they're super different, but it's awkward to collect these works, but I think it's really important because they're increasingly a valuable part of our contemporary society, and artists are increasingly turning to digital expressions, so we need to figure out how to support those, and figuring out ways that, like, institutions and rich people can, rich institutions and rich people can be more comfortable buying them and supporting that work. I think is super crucial. It's awkward, and And that's like, we've gone through this before with happenings and performance art, where we, it's the experience, you have to be there, blah, 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 but like, we've gotten really good at selling contingent objects, which is like the object that was produced from the performance. So we've figured that out in a way, and it's still kind of awkward, and everyone understands that that's not what is being sold. The piece was where it was situational or relational, but buying the contingent object is helpful, or works.
I'm going to take an institutional perspective on this. So, SXSW has a long history of finding other people to spend money on the things it's interested in exploring, and recently it convinced the Mellon Foundation to give it $1 million+ to explore what it means to include artists in the act of conservation. And two of the projects that they're working really closely on, one of the projects which I'm one of the researchers on, really trying to answer this question with $250,000 per project backing and a 5-year horizon. So it's probably not something we're going to nail tonight. But having said that, what we're discovering early on is, and what has been, I guess, part of the discourse to this point, is that there's a number of ways that you can consider what is the art object, or what is the thing that you're collecting, or the thing that you're presenting, or the thing that you're buying. And in many cases, the thinking that has been applied to the traditional act of conservation, which is there is a thing in the world, there's one iteration of it, and I've got it in my hands and I pay for it. We've been experimenting and exploring that for a long, long time. So Dan Flyman is a really good example. The thing that he sold was a kind of lined paper, like laboratory paper notes with his signature on it that said, I'm going to sell you for a large amount of money the right to go and put some lights in a particular arrangement in your museum or your home. And so you go and buy the lights, you go and install the lights, but they become a flavin because you've bought the right according to him, based on a piece of paper that you purchased from him. And so this disconnect between the thing that people see in the world or the experience they have in a gallery or in a home is a disconnect that has been around for a long time, and it's only now being played out through mediated cultures like the delivery and the experience of digital art. And so a project I'm working on at the moment with an artist, Julia Scher, is called Predictive Engineering, and she made this work, 2 iterations of which in the mid-90s, and it was primarily looking at surveillance, the act of surveillance and how it intersects with the body and identity, and a bunch of other things that wrap around it. She's going to redo the work in 2016 when SXSW reopens, and the work doesn't make sense anymore because surveillance has changed. So she was one of the first people to use surveillance cameras in a kind of art experience. And surveillance cameras are not surveillance anymore. We carry surveillance everywhere we go. We share it with, it turns out, the NSA and the Googles of the world. And so that's surveillance now. So she can't put on the work, which is a set of concepts and experiences, without changing the work. But we bought the old work. And so how do we show the new contemporary version of the old work for it to still be about the things that it was about when it was conceived? And for me, that's a really interesting place for digital and mediated work. When someone is doing a snapshot in time that says, this painting is of my dad the day before he died, and it's done, it's finished, it's in the world, and forever. It exists as long as that medium holds, as long as you keep it out of the sun, basically. But if you've got a computer-mediated work that's to do with a room and how people intersect with the room and how many people are there and the things that it does in response to the movements you make, then is it the experiences people have? Is it the LC2 that you wrote it on? Is it the colours you chose? Is it the type of light you used? There's so much that's missing when we think about what we collect, and this is just a sampling of it, I would argue.
I kind of wanted to segue out of your, breaking into the idea of context and how work, if it really relies on the context in which it was created, can be fundamentally changed if it's presented in a different time period or a different, if it was on one type of network or browser and then a year later that browser or network doesn't exist anymore, is the work fundamentally ruined, or does the artist need to make those decisions to bring it into, the new current present of what we use? So that to me was kind of begging to ask a question about what is the context of the internet? How does that affect an artwork?
I have a good example of that from my time at Rhizome. So one of the biggest programs that Rhizome has is their conservation program. And so they have one of the largest archives of digital art and internet-based art. One piece of the collection is by a net artist named Olia Leolina, and it was called My Boyfriend Came Back from the War, and it's a net-based piece. And it was a series of I think it was Java or something, and you kind of click through these different rooms and something would play. And the way the animations would run was it was designed on the internet speeds of the time, which was the late 90s, so it was like a dial-up modem. And so they were able to find the source code, put it back on, but in a modern browser, what used to take 5 minutes became 5 seconds. So this animation just flipped through. Then it became a conversation of oh, should we get an emulator? And how do you we can find the browser a 1997 browser, but then we're still grappling with the fact that we have fast internet speeds. So how do you emulate slower internet speeds today? And so after having a lot of these kinds of conservation problems, one solution that I talked a lot about with my colleague Radin was that it's about documenting work in its contemporary hardware and context, giving the full context, because if you take a screenshot of a work, you're sort of removing it, you're abstracting it from everything that it belongs. Not only is the software important, it's also the hardware. So taking a video of a work running on contemporary hardware, finding a computer from 1997 running the software from 1997 and running on internet speeds in 1997 will give you the full story, the full context of the piece. But only realizing that in 2014, it's a bigger problem. So who's responsible for taking care of these works? That's hotly debated. A lot of artists, when you make something, you don't want to constantly care for it, as you grow tired of a piece. So that's why digital conservators are so important, and there should be more of them to help care for. I guess it's you should perhaps consider internet art and other media-based art as sort of living things, and they have a lifetime and a life cycle. They could pass, and you have to let them go, and you have to remember them through documentation. Otherwise, you have to find ways to keep them running and keep them alive.
I think the impact of the internet is obviously tremendous for us all. And the one thing for art is that, obviously it democratizes art and makes it easier to collect. Instead of shipping work A from, work from point A to point B, it's now you can download it quickly and have some digital signature on it. It's so much easier. Fundamentally, when I talk to the buyers who are collecting art these days about digital art, about traditional, matter art, if you will, the common denominator at the end of the day is really that artist. I ask them, buyers who buy art and buyers who don't buy art, why do you, for those who do, why do you buy art? And oh, it's because I connect with the artist, I can connect with this piece. It's always something at the end of the day about the artist, and about why that piece matters to them and is relevant. And when it comes to digital means, it's the same thing. It's really about the artist and the common denominator, which is the creation and the creative expression and the passion. And that's really the most important thing, and the bridge that brings together the digital with the tangible. I think when we think about photographers, when we talk about film photographers who, when the digital camera came, it was, wow, that really transformed their industry. And now they really have to go back in time and say, when I produce digital works of art, it really is about, focusing on the process and me and why I'm passionate about creating this piece. And at the end, I think digital and tangible are pretty much the same thing if we look at the common denominator.
You asked about context, and I think that when talking about digital art, there's like a huge breadth of art that encompasses. And some digital art, like these on display, like can require a screen, and some require clicking, some require a browser experience, some require relational aspects, aesthetics, or whatever. And so when talking about what art can exist on things like this or in a market, like we have to parse out what type of art we're talking about beyond digital art.
I'd just like to say yes.
So one thing that I would love to talk about too is provenance. When you're talking about art that's currently moving through the internet, obviously we have a lot of trouble keeping ownership and intellectual property straight in the current kind of like hyper sharing, hyper scrolling. Everyone is, you know, copying and republishing to their own social channels, not necessarily thinking about the artist. It's more about like, I like this, look at this, it reflects on me. It's not about the creator. So I was wondering if, I mean, some of you are building tools that deal with telling, you know, stories about works based on who created them and why. How important is it to build those types of stories or, you know, metadata into future platforms for displaying and collecting digital art?
I think it's incredibly important. You know, part of what we're trying to do at Bluebird is to bring the art world and that conversation onto a mobile platform. And when it comes to folks who are liking one piece, when it comes to folks who are following a piece, there's also the other side of the conversation, which is buyers and what they're liking and what they're following. And also when it comes to art consultants, gallerists, the conversation is coming online. And that in itself constitutes context around a piece. And that is an important aspect when we bring the physical world when it comes to conversations online. And that's one important aspect that Bluebird is very much focused on exploring.
There's two big questions in there. One was like provenance, and the other one was kind of context. And again, with provenance, we've been working with provenance for, you know, not as long as we've been working with objects. Objects have been collected and put in galleries for longer than that has been, you know, the USA. Certainly a lot longer than it's been in Australia. So we're pretty good at that, and we're pretty good at things that are collected that are emblematic. I think Ben touched on that really accurately. And so where it's important to you to remunerate an artist, because for many cases that's not important, especially with net art. The remuneration is through another lens, and it may be, especially in social, the thing that you're doing, as you say, is actually, you know, a variation of narcissism, and it's not actually about the art at all. But when you are trying to support financially the creation of work and the support of artists for making that work, like, I guess the thing I'm really interested in is, and it's a question for the people who make it as much as the people who distribute it, as much as the people who consume it, where that choice about sharing an ownership or delivering an ownership becomes a really messy one. And so we, you know, in my last 3 jobs, we would get master files, and often cases master files is a really strange term because it's not what people actually end up seeing. Or it might be sometimes what they see, but not other times what they see. And then the master file is not the thing we've actually bought. We've sort of bought the idea, and then we get delivered a bunch of different variations of that idea that we can execute in different ways through time. So that's how do you then document and share and promote that? Is a really interesting question. It's difficult to resolve. And then for me, the most interesting thing is, or the most important thing is, if we want to create a class of people who can make some money making things that go into the world that change how we see the world, if we want to support artists making work, if that's important, then it's beholden on collecting institutions, collectors, but also the people in the everyday to make work that they can see earning money, even if it's a tiny amount of money, and to buy work and pay for it so that artists get remunerated. I think one of the things that my group does and does well is pay artists to do all sorts of things, and they might not be to make art. And so sometimes art comes out of it and sometimes it doesn't, but you're paying them to think about and answer the questions that they want to pose that no one else is interested in or can pose. So that's the provenance one. The context one is much longer, and I'll let someone else talk before I get into that.
Nobody wants to talk about context.
Well, can you repeat the context question? Because there were a lot of questions.
Sorry, I got excited.
So, yeah, I'd be interested to hear, obviously when you're looking at a work of art online, let's say I'm clicking through Rhizome and I end up at a website, there's not a wall text that I can reference telling me what I'm looking at, or, a curator's not gonna help me understand why this is relevant to me. It's sort of all up to me to decide if I like it, if I get it. Usually what I do is kind of play around and then forget what I was doing and close the browser. Like, that's a very different way of viewing art than viewing it in a gallery or at a museum, where so much of the way that you're viewing it is due to the context. The museum really wants you to know why they've chosen this artist. This piece was created in this date. You'll kind of go through the gallery based on the way that they've decided would make the most sense for you to understand the works. That just goes out the window online. So I'm just wondering, for understanding works that are inherently kind of like born out of the internet in this way, how do we bring context back to those?
Well, that's, I think that's why museums are such an important element in society, right? They're here to help educate the public. They act as they're a place where informal education can take place and more didactic education can take place. Yeah, I feel like when you come across a work of internet art, it's like kind of coming across a piece of street art. Like, you're walking down the street and you look up and there's this mural, but it doesn't necessarily have wall labels. If you're educated in street art, there are telltale signs that can help you decipher who that person is, what this piece is about. I know there are all these things that indicate what this piece means, but yeah, it's about a level of education. So if you're not informed, it's harder for you to penetrate. But that's not to say that you can't find takeaway meaning from your own personal experience seeing something without any of that information. But I do feel that this sort of art making that happens online is slowly starting to come into the arena of institutions, and as it becomes institutionalized, that means more academics are going to research and write about it, and there'll be more education around this practice, and more people will just be informed. So that was just a long way to say that that's the museum's job. These are the educators' job.
I like how you look at me.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You're
that's your job.
Yeah. So maybe I'll let you talk about it more.
I think the street art analogy is a really good one, and I like the idea of the stumble upon metaphor. And I'm curious, actually, I'm going to ask a question back to you or to Jake about the deliberation of the platform or the delivery mechanism when someone's creating a painting or a 3D sculpture or casting something in bronze. It's just as important that it's in bronze as it is the shape. It's not, if you recast it in glass, it's not the same work. And so if I'm creating something for a stumble upon online experience that intersects with a whole bunch of context that I don't know that person has at that moment, I'm doing that with deliberation. And if I'm making something that I know is going to be presented, say, on a looped video in a gallery, or in this case, on someone's wall still for whatever period of time, then I, the artist, know that context, and I'm making work in response to that and acknowledging that. And so I'm curious about Electric Objects' approach to putting things that aren't designed to be displayed through that particular window in that environment. Is it also people scanning their kids' drawings at daycare and sticking them up as well? I'm curious about that.
Yeah. So you're able to display things that you, like images that you have on your computer, so a scan of your kid's drawing from preschool, or an image that you come across online. We can't guarantee that that will look great in this particular frame, but I think when you take something from the drawing on the table and then putting it on the wall, but sort of elevating it and saying this is art.
I won't say that.
Yeah, perhaps. But this is one, and so through we've had these conversations, and this is one reason why we decided to initiate an artist in residency program. We wanted to facilitate artists to make work specifically for this context, because you're right, the context is important in the art making, and so if a work is made specifically with this platform in mind, it will be more appropriate. We also think people will find more value in that experience, and we're hoping that art that is made with EO in mind will be valuable enough for people to subscribe to, and through that subscription model, we're able to pay artists. So we're still figuring out the logistics and the economics, but we think that a 70-30 split of all revenue generated through our storefront is fair, so 70% for the artists and 30% to Electric Objects. And so through that system, we're hoping that we can support people to make art for this device, and
Going on the street art conversation, I think that street art is really an interesting thing to talk about here, because the distinction between graffiti and street art, where street art is kind of art that happens to be on the street sometimes, and sometimes in a gallery, and kind of goes both ways, but graffiti's been illegal and specific, and there's a lot of conversation, when people start cutting Banksies out of walls and selling them, there's a really interesting moment, trying to institutionalize, take something out of the specific frame that it was made within. And Banksy does make gallery art, but he chooses, and I think that's an important distinction. And you said we want to make a frame for artists to respond with, and I think that's really exciting. But in your guys' Kickstarter, somebody said that internet art can be trapped inside our computers. And I was like, no. That was a good line, but I think that some of it is definitely trapped inside our computers, but some of it is totally just an experience that is meant to be in our computers. And again, figuring out which one belongs on the computer, which one belongs on this is what I'm most interested in. Yeah.
Well, some feedback we've received from our beta testers is that, this is a very experiential sort of product. It's hard to explain to people without you seeing it in your life, which is one reason why we've been doing these showrooms. So one piece of feedback we've received is that once they have it in their home and they've been living with it, they start to see things online that they go, oh, that would fit really great in this frame. So it's so we're not saying that all things on the internet belong in this frame, but there are lots of things that can. So yeah, that piece that is designed to be a in-browser experience. I know that Lena, for example, would never want a piece in Electric Objects because the browser is a really essential part of the piece. It needs to have the browser as the frame. That's the important framing element for her and her practice. So we're not saying all art belongs here, but art doesn't live in a vacuum. There's never going to be a one-size-fits-all solution for any of these practices. And so I think this goes back to an earlier question we had about, is there a solution in the market? Can digital art also, can it live in a marketplace with physical art? And I think it can, and sometimes it just depends on the piece. So.
I really like that metaphor of being trapped in a computer or in a frame, and I think that kind of goes back to the idea of Electric Objects. I actually think it might be interesting to flip it, though, think of trapping it as a positive idea, where you're capturing something that you really like and you want to hold on to, and you don't just want to see it like fade away into your stream. You want to have a one-to-one relationship with it for a sustained amount of time, rather than completely forgetting. I know I personally struggle with remembering the names of artists whose work I like on the internet, or pieces I've seen and I don't know how to find them. I feel like I've created a lot of Google Docs with a lot of things in them that I think will help me remember. And then it's a challenge to trap something that comes from the internet. And I feel like there's this relationship between, the back and forth, like Courtney, you were talking about it. You feel like the meaning comes out of what happens in real life, but the internet or the computer is a tool to get to that place. And I know we thought a lot about that at SF MoMA, where we really didn't want people to feel like they were viewing a work when they were looking at its image on the website. We wanted them to come see it in person. So I feel like this isn't really a question, but I just really enjoy contemplating the idea of trapping something from the internet to make it a physical thing that you can spend time with and have an actual experience looking at, because I think that for me has been missing in a lot of. It wasn't a question, but.
When early film started, it was really had a lot of theater in it, where the camera was stationary and the actors were super expressive because they were used to acting on a stage and people were really far away, and they used lots of makeup. And then they started realizing, wait, this is a different medium. How do we steal? I'm stealing it from an article right now, actually, from Alcharina. So I think that the internet actually is just relational and actually is meant to be experienced in that way. So for I don't know, I guess for net art, I don't think this is good, but for digital art, it's awesome. Yeah, so there's young internet-based artists, and there are artists that are using all of these aspects of the net as part of their medium, not as a secondary, and it's not just a promotional aspect of the work. And that's the most exciting part of contemporary art to me today. So I want to remember that when we're thinking about how this is going to change the art market, because I think that some of the most exciting work I experience is when somebody sends me a GIF right at a specific moment in time, and it's from this one person at a very specific moment in my life. And that's the power of the internet. And I would love to see this beautiful frame kind of capture some of that also. Yeah.
Sorry, I keep getting stuck in your shoe. So I have one more question that I'd love everyone on the panel to address before we open it up to questions from you lovely people out there. I feel like with the internet, everyone sees so much more visual culture every day, and it's sort of, Instagram has given rise to a lot of people having higher interest in photography, and I know we actually saw more people coming to see a photography show at SF MoMA, and we felt it could actually be attributed in some ways to more people being interested in photography because of Instagram. And there's more, just people are using tools creatively and developing their tastes because of all of these platforms like Tumblr, Instagram. I'm not sure if Facebook would fit in there quite as well. New Hive, all of these places that are facilitating creativity and asking people to have tastes and have, an expression that they want to put out to the world. So I almost feel like we're on this crusade towards popularizing art in a way that we haven't necessarily seen before. And I think especially with computer-based or digital art, there's this interesting thing at play there where many more people are interested in art, and there's much more access to art, but the people making a lot of that art aren't getting anything out of that because it flows free, it's almost a public service, the way art kind of just flows out of the internet. So I'm wondering, how can digital platforms, or what could a future look like where digital artists could make money and this popularization of art could be a really great thing for everyone who's interested in art, especially the ones making it?
So what would that future look like is the question? Well, okay, maybe I'm biased, but I think this is a step in that direction. Like, you know, soon we'll have these tools that'll allow us to elevate work that's made online and made with and for computers in our homes, because our homes are going to be one giant computer. But until that time, we'll take that baby step and like put these screens in our home and see if we like that possible future. So yeah.
I have a tale of two Instagram artists. The first one is very open about sharing her art, and her name is Hyperallergic. And her works, she shares her dogs, her cats, everything. She shares 3 times a day. And she's getting a lot of buyers for her works. They're wooden bowls and beautiful, one-of-a-kind pieces of spoons. And then the other artist is, I'm not going to say her name, is someone who's very limited in her Instagram sharing, and she doesn't have many followers. And as a result, she's not selling that much. So the question is, you know, I think we're going to talk to digital soon, but the thing is, like, the difference is that when an artist engages an audience and captures a large audience, she is inevitably going to sell more works. That is fundamentally the case, because engagement leads to purchases. That is something that, you know, doing 2 years of ethnography and research, I'm come to truly believe that that is going to be the case. And with digital, it's just that it travels faster, it goes wider, and that in itself will become, in my, you know, how I see the world when it comes to digital art, it will be the way that more purchases will be made. The question is, you know, I think it's more about, for the works that will be purchased, can they be one of a kind? Can they be a limited edition? And those that the rarity and the scarcity is really the question part. It's not about how far it spreads, it's about whether you can spread wide as an artist. Number 2, can you limit some works that you can sell that is one of a kind and that you can really engage with a few people who said, I absolutely need to have that piece right now on my screen.
That was this topic, I think, for me. I'm hopeful that quality leads to selling. I don't know if that's that bad. And I'm curious that the iTunes, you know, 70-30 split equivalent is the model used here. I think that's, you know, I'm curious about that as well. I think it's quite interesting. If we do the work that we do really well, then we engage people with it, then that's like a little success. And if we, you know, the general we can be supported in making work that changes how people see the world around them and see themselves, then that is art, hopefully, and hopefully that can be remunerated. I'm not totally convinced that's actually going to be the case. I'm a little bit pessimistic looking at art at the moment, and I don't think, you know, just as a balance to the positivity of the rest of the panel, I don't think Electric Objects and their peers are going to fix that. I think it's coming from somewhere else, but what they are going to do, which is positive, hopefully, is play a part in this growing change that allows the people who've always seen art as an elitist practice to be something that becomes closer to what they can do and how they can change themselves through making work in the world. And whether no one sees that work or someone sees that work or many people buy that work, I'm less interested in that than I am interested in people having art experiences in the everyday and changing how they see the world, even if that's for the worse. I think that's the role of art, and our role as an institution, but also, you know, my role as an independent contractor is I'm interested in changing people's lives and changing how people see the world. And the money bit comes later, and sometimes never comes at all. And a lot of artists think the same way, and these sorts of technologies, I don't think you can change that, but they might open up more people who want to go through that themselves. So it's 50-50.
Well, the thing that I always think about when it comes to specifically Instagram and how it's kind of opening up this world to everyone is starting to participate, and there's now artists and participants. So I don't know. I try to just remember that when I'm seeing these people also making stuff that looks amazing, but maybe it's just not that conceptual backing behind it?
It's a really hard question. And I mean, art's always been so, it's just a luxury commodity, so it's always been rare and hard to sell. And just because there's millions more people making it won't change that. I think that like art, like networked art as advertising works for some people. Like Hennis Youngman, Jason moves some YouTube videos, and now he's making money selling paintings. Like, so he gathered a big audience, reached a lot of people, you know, makes money in a traditional art world kind of way. Like artists as curator, or like Brad Chamel, like, and people in like the Just Chillin' crowd, like they made a community, they elevated all of them, and now those people are kind of teaching at craft. They've like made a name for themselves and institutionalized that without selling their work necessarily. I think the jogging might be monetized now, but like Nick Breeze is an awesome new media artist in Chicago. A lot of his work is kind of pedagogical, and it makes sense that SAIC has now like asked him to teach for them. So like you can use your platform in any way, and it doesn't have to be selling it. And I think a lot of new media or networked artists are figuring that out, and it's awkward. And also like Art 404, an artist collective, they kind of reached a big audience by doing weird online stunts, and they like sell T-shirts and stuff. So they've tapped a different market, and they're exploiting it in a good way, not in a bad way. But so there's lots of different models, and it's all scarce. Everyone's broke anyway. So yeah.
Awesome. So does anyone have questions that they'd like to ask?
So, first of all, I want to apologize for for talking too much about electric objects in this panel. This is not a giant plug or commercial for electric objects. The question I have is, so I didn't study art history, and so a lot of this stuff is new to me, and I'm learning it through the process of working on this and working with Zoe and others. It seems like there's like an ongoing conversation about like how we're having so much trouble supporting contemporary artists making work on and for screens. And the question is, has society ever done a good job of supporting its contemporary artists? And so is this an issue that has actually very little to do with like an emerging technology?
So I don't have an art history degree, but the answer is yes.
Sorry, I forgot my question.
So the question was, is this something because of technology, or is this something because of society? And it's the latter, it's something because of society. And what's become really interesting is at least for me, this is an extension of your question, is the breakdown of medium specificity or craft specificity in contemporary practice. And Ben touches on that really well. Even 50 years ago, primarily, painters were painters and sculptors were sculptors. And that's not really the case so much anymore. There's lots of people who are medium specific, but more and more, the more successful contemporary artists are people who are actually making a living versus the same as the music industry or the film industry or any other creative industry. The little peak at the top of the people who are making a living, looking at them now, are primarily people who cross many medium and include digital in their work in a way that makes a mockery of the idea of sort of new media, because it's not about new media, it's about quality, and it's about strong concepts that realize with change, like emotional responses from audiences. And I think it's good that not all artists make a living making art, because there'd be even more crap. And I think it's good that not all musicians make a living making music, because there'd be even more crap music. And so it's actually important that as a society we exercise a little bit of fancy choosing, this is Willa's term, for people who aren't professional curators curating things, So we all do with fancy choosing. And I guess if you own one of these, then you do some fancy choosing about what you put on there. And when your friends come over, you'd say, I've curated a night of contemporary photography. And they'd go, no, actually it's just fancy choosing. And so our curators are professional choosers. And part of what they do, in the same way as someone who curates a film festival, or someone who works for a film company and decides what films to make, or someone who works for a publisher who decides what books to publish, is that they help weed out some of the crap, but also celebrate and engage with some of the finer things we'd never get found if they weren't in front of someone who's a professional chooser. And so that will always be the case, I hope, because if it's not the case, then it's more crap.
I politely disagree with that. And the question I'm going to pose is, you guys know on Airbnb. Let's say Airbnb decided as a company, we're only going to show you 50 homes in San Francisco they can book, and those are the only ones, and we'll rank it for you, force rank for you, which one's the best ones. Would Airbnb be the same platform as it is today? Yes or no? Yes. No. I mean, I think that's a fundamental thing with being digital and being mobile and being on the internet, is that the buyers and the likers of art are coming on. They're like, we have a voice, and we want to like things, we want to produce things, and we want to rank things. And I think that is going to change the future of how art is going to be collected. I recently talked to the director at a museum, great reputation museum in the San Francisco Bay Area, and she said, artists have always struggled, and they will continue to struggle. And I politely object to that. I think that given the advent of the mobile platform, where you have the Holy Trinity in your pants pocket, and you can make a connection with artists every day, a different artist every day, and you as a consumer have your own taste because you use Instagram, you use Pinterest, you use Twitter, you use Facebook, you have your own tastes. That's going to completely change how we approach and appreciate and purchase art.
You just keep equating consumer's taste with artistic taste. You got an artistic experience. No one rose their hand when you brought up this Airbnb thing. You just compared art to Airbnb. Frankly, it's disgusting. I mean, this entire conversation has been around money. I mean, it seems to be the elephant in the room.
What do you guys think is the audience?
I mean, art is not elitist. We have made art elitist.
Art's elitist.
In the United States, maybe it'll continue to remain elitist right now. Art is not. Everyone has seen a painting. Come on, everyone has had an artistic experience. Everyone. It's like street art is
$5 million.
Fine art is elitist.
Yeah, and that's because it's useless, and it's awesome. I love it, but it is useless.
No, we're realistic.
So it has to be rare to sell it for the prices to support to have artists make a living. And I think what's interesting right now to your question is that New Media Art Online is democratizing, where people are like making work, and millions of people around the world are seeing it, and that's new. The question of making a living from art, having that be a struggle is not new. That's always been the case, but we're getting these massive audiences and interest in our work and sharing it, and that's really exciting, but money has not come with that. And maybe it will, I hope it will. I think it probably will, but what am I saying? New media artists have really struggled to make a living. And I think that of all the ones I've spoken with, most of them have very rarely sold their work. They usually rely on other jobs completely. So even the best digital artists, networked artists, they're not making livings on that, and that's different because the best painters, the most famous painters are. And so this type of work, giving them a way to make up money doing the things that I personally love would be awesome.
I just wanted to add on that I think while we wouldn't want, of course, the whole discussion to be about money, that is something that comes up a lot for artists, especially those making digital art that's much harder to sell, or, you know, not speaking of art as a product, just speaking practically about knowing that people need to earn money to pay for things like food and shelter. So, you know, I think one of the things that I'm most excited about are platforms and, you know, designers and technologists who are excited about ways to bring art to more people so that it could be a sustainable practice for somebody who really cares about making their art and make something that really is interesting and engaging to people to make money through that. So just a little extra bit there. So questions, more questions? Anybody? In the middle? Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like, you know, we've got these two radically different directions happening with how people are talking about bringing money to digital artists. You've got things like Sedition, where they're creating these immensely large volumes of work you could buy, where you maybe get like a 3D rendered scene that loops for a few minutes, and it's an edition of like 5,000 or something. And then you have the other side, which is things like Paddle 8, which are taking a GIF, which is something that is completely casual and distributed on the internet, and isolating it to, say, a solid-state hard drive, and basically lock and keying it to the owner. And I'm just curious to hear some of you guys on the panel just talk a bit about how you see these really kind of opposing directions changing the way that digital art is going to meet the public and meet institutions for people to see in the future.
So I work on collecting digital art to display in museums, but also to collect because where there's quality issues. And it's really interesting also within, like, around your question is the intention of the artist, and so I'm really interested in the problems the artist is trying to solve, whether they're internal or external, and I'm interested in the questions they're trying to ask. But I'm also interested in how they choose to go about answering those questions outside of the object itself. And so there's a Australian video artist who I'm a big fan of, and he is really particular about how his videos are displayed. And so he does editions of 5 for the most part, sometimes more, sometimes less. And in the end, it's a quick-time movie. I mean, that's the thing you're buying. But he will only sell it to people he trusts, and he will only let it play as a file on a particular version of Brightside Media Player through a particular type of projector at a particular distance on a particular type of white wall, like a type of white. And so he's like, the work, because I can't control it as you could a painting, I want to control everything about how you experience this work, because that's exactly what I've made, and that's what will give you the experience that I've tried to render for you, in the same way as if you cast a bronze sculpture, if there's a bit missing, you can stop and you start again. And so for him, he's in one end of that spectrum that you just articulated, and it's because that's his intention. I think that's really important. And then for other people, then it might be like, I know there's one New Zealand artist who's a traditional Tiwi artist, so he's like an islander, and he does lino cuts. And usually lino cuts are like editions of 5, you know, you print out editions of 20. And he's really interesting. He sells his editions uneditioned. It's like, I'm going to make 1 million of these. And primarily they don't even sell. Like he gives them away, or he burns them. Like for him, there's something else that's going on that's important. That's the concept behind the work. And so to answer your question is, hopefully there's an environment where the intention of the artist can be respected, and then whatever it is their intention, if it means that they make money or not, I'm ambivalent about. It's more important that as someone who's trying to support the making of work, what the intention of the artist. Everyone's like, so we have
Yeah.
You can just say it.
Okay, yeah. My name is Tita. I studied under Julia Scher in the mid-1990s. She was my video art professor. And so I remember those pieces very well. And I guess my question for you is, how important is it to recontextualize Julia's work, or the work of, let's say, somebody who's working pretty early on in surveillance, for this new generation? You know, I almost feel like showing that work in the context it was in when she was developing that work is also interesting, in that it is this kind of product of that particular time, and it has interest in its own way. And I think the other part of the question is that a lot of the debates you're having remind me of the debates in the 80s and 90s about video art, and how video art could be conserved, and how video art could be sold in editions and all of this stuff. And so I think maybe thinking about what you guys are talking about and contextualizing it within the history of new media art and the problems we've already faced with it in the past. And if you have any thoughts on
that. Like, cracking question. Like, if people will have it, I'll talk a little bit about this. Yeah? Okay. So I spent the last week with Julia, and I'm going to spend a few weeks with her early next year in a few weeks.
Tell her I say hi.
And what's been totally fascinating, to go back to intentionality, is watching her grapple with the changing nature of the context that her work will be engaged in, and for her to make an active choice about how it was conserved, because the work that we bought, the work the museum bought, wasn't even the first version of it. It was first sort of performed years before we actually bought it, and we bought it from the second version. And so, did we buy something that included the first version? And if we did, are we buying something that is going to be recreated in the future? And what we're doing, the thing that's interesting about the Artist Initiative project is that instead of us making those decisions, she's making those decisions. And so we're really led by her intentions and goals and aspirations for the work. And it may end up being that we put on exactly the same work, exactly the same way it was in 1995 with no changes. And it may be absolutely different. And we're going to discover that with her. The things that we're bringing to bear are like our knowledge of contemporary surveillance, or our knowledge of contemporary computing, what's happened in between, but also looking back at the previous iterations of the work, and being able to bring that and make that contemporary in how we document it in a kind of rhizome model, and then allowing that as a moment to stop and let her be the person that says where it goes next, which I think is really important. And she's incredibly open to that, incredibly generous about that, and it's sort of like glorious and humbling and a bit strange all at the same time to be in the room with an artist who is trying to think about what it means to put on a work that is all about experience of space, is all about surveillance, is all about identity, is all about surprise, is about nudity, is about death, is about aliens, it's about a whole bunch of things. And listening to her like talk through the problems in her head is something that I think is really important about mediating experiences that we don't apply when we think about sculpture or a photo. Because you take that photo and you print that photo and you've made a print of that photo, and that's the thing you want people to see. And for her, that's not the case, and that's something about net art and digital art that is different and is important and is worth being clear about, as distinct from the sort of context of most of this discussion. And that, to me, is a rich and evolving thing that we're not going to crack, but it's important that if we're going to change how people see how they can be creative to include digital forms, then we actually need to do some rigor around them as opposed to just make them available.
Yeah, just before we started talking here tonight, I was reminded of the Andy Warhol drawings that were found on an old floppy disk recently, and thinking about young digital or internet artists today who create work, piles and piles and piles of work, but if they're not doing anything to keep those works safe, they could all be lost. And like how much of just Andy Warhol, who computer art was just a tiny, tiny piece of his practice. So I'm wondering, like, are we in this lost generation of the original computer artist people who don't have, more than a few small percentages of the amounts of work that are being kept?
Yeah, I mean, there is a whole generation of work that we know has been lost, and it's basically because digital obsolescence is just like a problem that quickly reared its head. And so now that we're aware of it, we can sort of like move forward with the preservation in mind. But that, thankfully, is one reason why the internet is so awesome. It's really great at making millions of copies of something. So you put an animated GIF out in the world, and maybe a lot of people save that to their computers or reblog it. You know, there are endless copies out there. So it's hard to keep track of those copies, but there is a value of that infinite reproduction. But that's only if you put it on the internet. So if it's a work that's saved on a floppy disk, for example, really now a very dead media, it becomes a bit more of a struggle.
Anybody else have a question?
Yeah, well, I mean, though actually a lot of early internet stuff has been lost. Like Text America was a pre-Flickr photo sharing site, and they just sort of disconnected it. And there's a little bit on the way back machine, but it's often, these were just like VGA photos, and the thumbnail of that is what's available on the way back machine. I mean, what you said about professional curators saving us from crap, it doesn't always do that. I mean, SF MoMA had a Jeff Koons retrospective in 1992, and the museum let Jeff Koons curate a show, and of course, Jeff Koons is now at the Whitney, so there's plenty of crap from professional curators.
Knew that someone was going to talk about it.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously there are good curators, but there also are, pressures on institutions, and someone just, curating a Tumblr is not going to have those pressures and might be better, will not select Jeff Koons. And sort of another danger with the internet. I haven't talked to Jen about the exact details about what happened with 2020 getting funding and what happened with that, but she did talk somewhat about the pressure she had from the VCs to change direction for 20 by 20 and sort of, how will Electric Objects be able to keep pressure to, eventually have, a large return on the investment that I think it's like $1.7 million so far is expected.
Yeah. Should I answer that?
Sure.
So the question about VC, so I was actually just having a conversation today with one of the early guys from Twitter, talking about the transition of Twitter to their advertising-based model. It's one of the scarier things. So this is physical hardware. It's really hard for a tiny startup to build a piece of hardware and distribute thousands of them to people all over the world. And so not having $1.7 million of my own, I had to go and get it from other people. And venture capital is a source of capital that's available for this kind of project. It comes with trade-offs, and it comes with, and the more money we raise, like if we go out and raise more money, there's an even higher expectation of return. And so we just have to do as good a job as we can in managing those trade-offs. I was actually talking today with the Twitter guy about what happens when, my fear is that we find out that people actually like things that we think are less valuable, and that's what they're willing to pay for. And does that steer the community in that direction? I was just talking to Mike about this from Neon Mob, who, this is a problem with capitalism, and it has to do with trying to use for-profit companies to do something good in the world, and the fact that Zoe was the first person to join the scene was the first thing that I tried to do to help mitigate that stuff and to keep us honest. And so I don't really have a great answer other than to say that what you've identified is a problem with using capitalism for good, and I hope we can sort of stay honest and continue to do a good job and try to support as many artists as possible, even if some of them are maybe producing crap.
Okay, thanks. I think that's a good place to, end the But yeah, let's settle on the capitalism and Jeff Good's. Always a good place to just wrap things up. But I invite everyone to stick around for a little bit, have another beer, and chat with the panelists and Electric Objects, and maybe somebody will do a demo and talk to me. I don't know like half of you here, and I'd love to meet you. So thanks for coming, and thank you guys.